It's Thursday night. Come on up. Come on, good girl. It's Thursday night live.
I love you, Sailor.
Are you
Attack.
ready?
She really.
That's Sailor loves guests.
Yes,
That's
she
her
does.
favorite thing, and so do our viewers.
That's right.
You guys love guests. You always are asking for them. We're sort of crowded in here. Everybody, but Ida. Look how Ida's not crowded in.
You noticed?
Ida's afraid of the rest of the group.
I'm maintaining my distance.
This is Ruth and
Social
Dana Shaw.
That's right.
Hi.
Ruth actually happens to be my sister, and Dana happens to be my brother-in-law.
He is my little brother.
Yeah, I used to be. So these guys are from California. A rare opportunity to get them into the studio, and actually this show came about. I've wanted to get Ruth on the show for a really long time, and then last night, Dana and I were, or 2 nights ago, Dana and I were having a conversation. It was reminding me I owe her. And I said, boy, that would be a good topic for the show. So the problem is that we don't remember the conversation.
Yeah. I'm over 70 now, so there's a lot I don't remember.
So here we are, just trying to figure out. But we're glad you're here. Feel free to ask questions. Dana and Ruth are family counselors. That's how I've sort of
Yep,
plugged
that'll work.
you.
That'll work.
And they've worn lots of hats in life, so they have all sorts of skills and abilities and backgrounds. And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to this live audience show like in about 5 months. And one of the things that we know that we're going to do when we do the live audience show is play the Newlywed Game.
Oh no! Oh no! He got us on here by a ruse.
Yeah.
So,
I
This
tried
was
to
a
warn you.
trick.
I tried to give you a little hint.
Yeah.
so we've never done this before.
He obviously knows that we wouldn't be on here if we knew about this.
Surprise.
Actually, I need to use the rest.
Right before the show, I said I think Ruth will be fine with it, but Dana will not like that we're doing that. And so I've
And
put
the surprise is neither of us.
I
are
put a
like
piece
it.
of paper in front of I put
Okay.
5 pieces of paper in front of each of you.
All right.
One of you has a red pen and one of you has a blue pen.
Okay.
Not that I'm gender specific or anything like that. You're welcome to use anything that you want, but but you can't let each other see what you're writing. So you're going to have to like sort of you could take all 6 pages and turn it sort of sideways and
All
write
right.
like between
Okay.
each
He
other.
doesn't trust
Right.
that you won't cheat,
So
but
here-
we know you
Well,
won't
Ida
cheat.
cheats all the time. So
What?
I can use
What's that? I won't.
So here's the
I
first.
have faith in you.
So here's the first question. Okay. The first question is, how many states has Dana lived in? How many states?
Lived it.
Has
So that's
Dana
hers
lived in?
mine, or that's
That's
we both
you're
answered.
You're both
Oh,
answered. Let's see.
Okay.
It's a
So
new
I'll
one.
let her put hers down first, and then I go 1, 2. Oh, excuse me.
I already knew. All right.
I'm trying to think how many.
Yeah, Dana's got the right answer. So
Or lived in. Or
Hi,
five.
Kristen. Welcome.
Okay.
Nice to
No.
see you tonight.
you're not allowed to say no. Stop that. See, they are cheating. they're not just.
All
they're
right.
outright
All right.
cheating.
We'll just leave it.
Dana comes up with 5. What was your answer, Ruth?
3.
Hold it up.
I don't know him very well.
Well, it's
So-
actually before you knew me. Those are
Yeah.
the places I lived.
So what?
Wow.
So what are the 2 that Ruth is missing, Dana?
Well, tell me what you got. What do you have?
Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and California.
All right. So I have lived in New York when I went to school, my first 2 years.
Okay.
And then I also worked and lived in Florida. So that would be the other 2.
Where'd you go to school, Dana?
Well, I actually crammed 4 years of college into 7. So it was
That's a long
so
answer to that question.
there was a number of
summary.
schools in there along the way.
I just want you to know that Linda said her
But I
answer was
graduated.
4, so Linda was closer than Ruth's answer.
Right. It was close.
Kristen thought
You
3.
can have him. No.
I graduated from Gordon College, is where I got my undergrad.
Yeah.
So that was the final.
Very good.
All right.
And so so do you want to give us any background in your early life, like from college running through, Dana, like where, just tell me a little bit about where you've been. And
All right. I grew up in Boston, outside of Boston, a place called town called Stoneham. Had 3 older. I had 6 siblings, so there were 7 of us. An older brother, and I have 5 younger sisters. part of that is that my mother died when I was 4, and my dad remarried. There were 3 of us, and then they added 4 more. But we grew up together. We were all part of a family. In fact, we just left a family reunion in Florida this last weekend. And so from there, basically grew up in that area till I was 18, went to school at a school called King's College in New York, Westchester County. And I don't know how much you want to go in, but this is a significant part of where I was going with some of that. And while I was at King's, I was a basketball player, played in high school, played a little bit at college. But at the end of my second year, I was at a point where I really didn't know what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, what was going on. And so I had left to go home, and I was looking for a job, and I had a friend of mine who I played basketball with who had asked me about if I was interested in going down into Harlem and to work with Young Life there. And being a kid from the blue collar background, very little diversity in our town. My first response, I said, "Well, I'll think about it." But I was clearly not interested in doing that. When I got home, couldn't find a job. He called me and said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "I'm coming." So I ended up going down there, and it was really the life-changing experience early in my life that has sort of set a course for where I've gone since then. I think the most important thing was having not had any experience in the Black community at all, I just discovered an incredibly wonderful culture. A lot of brokenness, as all of us would know, but yet in the midst of that, a sense of joy, a sense of enjoyment, a sense of it was just a great culture to be a part of. And I met some incredibly wonderful people in that place and learned a lot about that. But the other piece that was significant and part of that was that I saw my culture through their eyes. And that was also gave me a critique about a lot of things that coming from that perspective. I spent a summer down there, and then at the end of that summer, a couple of guys that I played basketball with, since I wasn't going back to school, invited me to come out to California, which I did. Went out to California, and then spent a year bumming around, doing my motorcycle stuff, and just having fun. Yeah, Ruth was not in the picture as of that, and we won't say where she was in school.
I'm younger.
She's a little younger.
7 years.
Yeah. So spent that year out there, and then actually hitchhiked back from California to Boston at the end of that year.
You hitchhiked across the country?
Across the country.
Wow.
And I can actually tell you all the rides I got. So, wow. But it was great. I did it in 6 days. Made it back to Boston.
He can tell you every car and describe every person on that.
Were they all cars? No truck?
No, it
was a truck. Yeah, there's a couple trucks. Yeah.
You know what a therapist says about that? The things that you remember in detail are usually traumas. Anyway, we'll go on.
So, anyways, having done that, I got back home, and again, there was some very significant things that happened during that time. It was during Vietnam, during the Vietnam War. I had gotten back, and I was working at UPS nights with a guy. Met a guy there who had been the quarterback on the football team when I was at Stoneham High School, and he had been a Green Beret, had done 3 tours in Vietnam, and at that time the culture was my country right or wrong. And he said to me while I was there, he said, "What's the draft status?" I said, "Well, I'm sure they're looking for me." And he said, "Well, do everything you can not to go." And he said, "They're not trying to win the war." And it was just a shock to me that here's a Green Beret who would say, don't go there. And so it really began that process too of who do you trust and who's not trustworthy kind of stuff. And all of those kind of questions. So that was the 60s was a seismic change in our culture. And I certainly was affected by that and a part of that. And so out of that, I got my draft notice and actually was working another job with Federal Reserve. And there was a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard who asked me prior to getting the draft notice, he said, if you ever need to get into the National Guard, let me know. When I got the notice, I called him. He said, I'll see what I can do. And ended up that I did go into basic training, spent that time there in the Army, but literally at the end of the time that we did basic and our MOS, we had a whole company of National Guardsmen, and there were 2 regular Army guys in it. And when we left, we went home, and those guys went to Vietnam on a plane the next day. And I just remember thinking that, and when I reflect back on it, how, for me, anyways, it was God's grace in my life that I didn't have to go through that experience, which I have a cousin who did as a Marine, and there have been a lot of difficult times since then. So for me, that was really helpful. I ended up going to Gordon College. There were some friends of mine that I'd met in New York City when I was working there who were going to seminary up there. And so I ended up going to Gordon, hanging out with them. Coach saw me play basketball, said, come and play. So I went and played basketball and went to school and finally graduated there. But again, I was at a place, been a lot of things had gone on in my own life that sort of kept me from knowing how well I could do. And so I laugh about it, but I finished college with a 2.01, I think, if I made that much. But I finished, and that was the key, that I did get finished and did get done. And in the last spring of my senior year, I had grown up in a very, I don't know what kind of language you're in, but fundamentalist church that was a very narrow perspective.
Very rule-oriented.
Rule-oriented is probably a way to say it. And I had, because of my mother's death and because of some other things, there was a lot of anger, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain around my mother's death and all of the stuff that happened there. So I was pretty angry at God. And during that last, that spring, I was really at a place where I was sort of like bankrupt. I was asking relationships. I was asking material things. I was asking basketball to fill the hole in me that really can only be filled by a God who loves us. And so I remember saying, God, I don't know if you're really out there, but if you are, I'm willing to listen. And I'd really come to that place of just hitting the bottom. And so within a week's period of time, I went to a wedding of one of these friends of mine who ended up from Harlem, and his sister-in-law was getting married. And so I was invited to come out there. I knew that family. And he said to me, when we got there, he said, I walked in and I was shy enough and insecure enough to wonder whether this guy actually remembered who I was. But when I walked in, he said, hey, Dana, how you doing? And oh, good. He remembers me. And the next thing he said was, what are you doing next year? And I said, well, I have possibly a job offer to teach and to coach and stuff. That's where I'm headed. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about coming and living with Marilyn, his wife, and himself, and working with me in ministry. And so at that point, after the wedding down in Syracuse, those of us from Syracuse, I used to call it the armpit of the East, but I'm sure those...
That's not nice.
That's not very nice. So anyways,
apologies to our Syracuse viewers.
We
Yes,
talked
ignore
for about 2.5 hours, and at the end of the time, he said to me this. He said, Dane, if you come to live with me, you'll go everywhere I go. You'll go everything I do for 16 hours a day. I will teach you everything I've ever learned. I will pour into you everything I can teach you. And I was absolutely blown away by the fact that here is a person who unconditionally offered himself to me. And I think that was the conduit by which God demonstrated unconditional love to me so that I could understand God's unconditional love too.
Danny, you said something the other night to me, and I'm not sure whether it's a saying that you say all the time or just something that you were saying impromptu, but it was something about, we were talking about grace, and you were saying that you can't love unless you've been loved, or do you know?
Yeah, it's the whole idea. If we don't think that we are lovable, then we cannot believe that someone else can love us. And so even though we desire that love, when someone starts loving us, that moves to intimacy, and in that intimacy in a relationship. And so if you really want to know me, here I am, because I'm not lovable. You cannot love me because I'm unlovable. And so that was really the key for me the next week. And I don't even recall why, because I wasn't reading the Bible in those days, but the passage of scripture that actually turned my life around was, while I was still a sinner, and sin being defined as independent of God, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't need God in my life.
Yeah.
While I was still in that place, angry at God for my mother's death, angry about a lot of other things that were going on, frustrated and hurt, God loved me. And he demonstrated that by dying for me. And so what the concept of that was for me, I don't have to earn that love. There's nothing I can do to earn it. And frankly, there's nothing I can do to lose it. He loves me. And so it transformed who I am. And I became a person not seeking other things to make me feel good about myself, but knowing that I'm a child who is absolutely loved by God. And because I'm loved by God, I can love others like he has loved me. And that means too, in that relationship, that I don't have to change them. I don't have to make them, I can love them as they are, just like I would.
Great. Thanks for going down that path with us. I know that's some intimate details that you just put out over the internet life for the whole world to hear.
Yeah, I've said it a few times.
I'm Cal. This is Ida. We're here with Dana and Ruth Shaw. We're really focusing on Dana today. Ruth is a person that we do want to talk to, but we're gonna save that as well for another time. But I do want to turn the tables a little bit and talk about Ruth. So if you would, don't use the same piece of paper, and you have to write bigger. So you can, if you want to be really frugal, you could turn that one over. But yeah,
I'm into recycling.
Yeah. So here's the question: what would Dana say is Ruth's best quality? What would Dana say is Ruth's best quality?
Dana's writing it, or I'm writing it?
You're both writing it.
What if you don't know how to spell the word?
You don't have to hold it up. You can just say, we can verify that it says the right thing. Okay, you ready? Here we are. Let's hear, Dana, what's your reveal? What would you say?
Well, I think she's
Turn it around.
I think she's gorgeous.
Oh, come on. Reveal what you really wrote.
I like what she looks like. She can really cook.
Oh, actually, Ruth's the one who's supposed to reveal, I think, in the actual game. So Ruth,
see, I knew ahead of time.
So Ruth, what would Dana say? Because Dana knows what he would say.
I think I'm a listener, listening.
You say,
I don't know.
You think Dana would say that you're a good listener.
Uh-huh.
All right, what did you say?
Well, I think she's good looking. I think she's a good listener. Yeah, I would agree with that. However, I put down servant heart.
Okay.
And that's how I see her. She is a person who offers herself in service to, I can't tell you how many people, every person we meet, actually. And we just finished a dinner with someone from the time that we were in the Hill District of Pittsburgh serving at a church there, who just talked about how she and I too, along with that, cared for their family.
Cool. Ruth, run us through some highlights of your life.
Okay. Let's see. I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania as an English major and got a C in English freshman year. And I changed my major on a hot dime, and I became a speech pathologist and audiologist. And that was the beginning of my special ed call. And basically, I loved that. And I graduated from there and did a student teaching assignment that was split. And at those times, when children had special needs, they were put in a separate school from the other schools. And I had a split assignment, and half of my assignment was in special school with special needs, children with special needs, and half of my assignment was with typical peer children.
Where was this?
Right in...
Like right around the area.
Monroe or Murraysville area.
Hempfield.
Yeah. It's been a long time. I'm old. Anyway, I did my student teaching as a speech therapist, but I actually loved the school with the children with special needs because there was a lot of variety, and I was more drawn to that than teaching kids how to make R's and S's correctly. And a lot of kids make their R's and S's wrong till they're a little bit older. So I didn't find that very challenging. I felt like I could teach someone to work with kids to do that in a day. And so I pursued more of the special ed, and I was given an opportunity to go to the University of Pittsburgh, and I did that. But before I did that, at Indiana University, I got involved in a Christian organization on campus called Coalition for Christian Outreach, which was a ministry to college students. And that's where I met Dana. And you made a 3-year commitment to that and raised your own support. And so I did that for 3 years. But towards the end of those 3 years, I had applied to grad school, was slowly making my way through a master's degree in special education. And
before you move on, Dana, the guy that you were mentioning, that was Coalition as well.
He actually, the guy that I lived with, and then after I lived with him and his wife in Pittsburgh, I went on to Gordon Conwell Seminary, but he moved on to the head of the Coalition for Christian Outreach.
Yeah.
And he was actually the president CEO of that.
Yeah.
So I met Dana there. We did college ministry. I was at the University of Pittsburgh. We had several hundred students, a couple hundred students at our fellowship meetings there at Pitt. It was wonderful. I was the female leader. There was a guy leader, and then we had a couple of wonderful pastors at the church. And we met at the church, but it was right across from the towers at Pitt. So did that for 3 years, my 3-year commitment. And the end of that, the third year.
That was Belfield Church.
Belfield
We
Church.
have a couple of viewers from
Belfield Church. Yeah. So I married Dana at the end of those 3 years, and I moved into Geneva College, into the dorm. And if anybody's old enough and remembers an energy crisis, right after we got married, there was an energy crisis and all the students left. So I lived in the boys' dorm in the front little part, and I wasn't allowed anywhere beyond that. But when they were gone, then we had the reign of the whole building, but nobody was there. So our first few months of marriage, that's where we were living. We were coming to Belfield Church on Sunday mornings, and I was commuting down and working Monday through Thursday at the University of Pittsburgh and staying with my friend at Carlow College, Barb, who worked there, and then coming back. So we kind of had this part-time marriage going for a little bit. And then we finished our commitment to the coalition. And at that point, actually, I kind of skipped a piece. When we were deciding about getting married, I knew that he had an interest and a call to go to the inner city based on his experiences. And so I really took a summer to plan and pray while he was
visiting
other ministries around the country, and to see if I also had that call. And when he came back, I let him know all the specifics, and I could write a book about what God did to show me that call during that summer. But anyway, we were married then.
Without the book, what is a sense of a call? Like how does somebody
the people
know?
that I met at Pitt in my classes, the classes that I took, the books that they had me read were all without plan. They were
all sort of coming together for you
towards
so you felt like that was an indicator.
I felt like that was an indicator. I felt like it was kind of a draw and just opening me up in ways that I was learning and growing in new ways. And Dana and I had the opportunity when we were working for the coalition to go down to Mississippi and look at a ministry there. It was John Perkins' ministry. And we both went at separate times and took separate students, not coordinated at all. We weren't married.
Mm-hmm.
And we both had that same experience. And we had opportunity to get to know John personally. And he's written many books. He was involved in the civil rights movement, amazing man. And he was able to give us a little direction and give us information. I had gotten to know just some people at Pitt that had ministries in the inner city. And I had grown up in a school where really I could count the people that were other races.
Yeah.
So that was very different and unusual for me. And when Dana came back, then we tried to discern whether we were right for each other. But I felt like I could support him in that call.
So we'll come back and move on from that point. But Dana, I want to ask you the same question. And here's the reason why I'm asking the question about calling. A lot of people in the disability world, there's a number of ministries, Christian ministries to people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And often people with disabilities or people in disability ministry will say things like, disability ministry is the heart of Jesus. That's, if you read Luke, that's who Jesus was. So really, disability ministry isn't a calling, it's everybody should be doing it.
Yep, I agree.
Right? That's sort of what people say. So I'm interested in what you think about that, how you view calling, and how would somebody know if they were called to disability ministry or inner city ministry or however you want to,
Well, I think it's an interesting thing you say. I obviously not everybody is called to the same ministry. I mean, I think that's something you want to be careful about, because when we ended up in the inner city and we're doing the work we did in the Hill District, there were friends of mine who would say, if you're not in the inner city, you're not in God's will.
Right.
And I think that that's a misnomer. My comment was, if God calls you here, we will welcome you here. If he doesn't, you find your call wherever it is. So, and the truth is, if everybody came, then the inner city would be full of people that everybody else have to leave. So
they call it gentrification.
Right, exactly. There we go. You got gentrification. So I think it's a lot of different things. It's experiences that we've had. It's interest we have. It's passion that we have in our heart for what it is. It's opportunity. It's challenge. It's all of those things that I believe, and we can use, I think, the picture of God opening doors. He can open doors to different things that happen. And certainly Ruth and I, if we had time, we could tell about how it ended up that we ended up where we did, because so many things came together in a confluence that made it
like
clear
a puzzle
that God really was leading us in that direction. So I think, but the thing that I appreciate about what you said as we were talking the other night is that everybody has a disability. Mm-hmm. Some disabilities are obvious, and you can see that on the outside. But all of us are broken people. If I want to look at this in a theological way, God designed us to be in relationship with one another. You remember the story of Adam and Eve and how gorgeous it is in the garden. But when they chose to be independent of God, when they sinned, is the language of Scripture, when they chose to be independent of God, things got broken, and the fall happened. And it happened in creation. It happened in people, their bodies, and in their spirits, and in their intellect, and every part of who they are. And so all of us have brokenness in us. I referenced the fact that my mother had died. There's a hole in me that is the way I still say it is that I still limp as a result of that. But there's a phenomenal concept that I want. I don't know if I want to do it now or later, but there's a book by Francis Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer was led L'Abri back in the day in Switzerland when Ruth and I were early 70s type thing. And he wrote a book that is a compilation of essays. And the title of the book was No Little People. And the concept in that is that that we are never fully healed in this life. But what we can have is substantial healing. And what he meant by that is that that God can work in and through us, even with our brokenness, to use us to fulfill his purposes. And the people that I thought about after we talked about that, obviously Johnny Erickson Tata. Here's a woman who is a young woman. She was a great athlete. She was there, and she dove into a shallow pond and broke her back. Never walked again. And yet the ministry that God has had didn't mean she didn't go through hard stuff, and the loss of that her own previous life didn't mean she went through hard times. And yet I worked in and through her as she opened herself to him. I don't know if you know the name of, let me see if I can, Nick.
Verjerchek.
Yes. He's out there. He's out there, and we've have seen him a number of different times, different things.
Life without limbs.
Life without limbs. Yeah. And here's a guy who's born without arms and legs. And yet God has just poured into him and through him just amazing things to other people that he's been able to speak to as a result of that. And he speaks about living our best life. And I really love that, It's this idea that God can work and substantially heal us, even in our brokenness. We're not fully healed. We're going to limp. We're going to, whatever our disability is, we're going to limp. But God's going to use that in a way that fulfills his purposes. And so for me, that was just life-changing again, to understand that even though I didn't think very much of myself and I didn't think that I had a whole lot to offer, God had designed me in a way that he could use me in that way.
That's great. This is Cal Clark and Ida. We're from Uniquely the Same. We're here with Ruth and Dana Shaw, family counselors from California. And I do want to make it clear in the last conversation that we in no way are trying to co-opt disability terms. So that we could easily offend by saying we're all disabled. But at the same time, we do stand for the biblical principle that we're all broken. And so we're not trying to take your disability, but we are saying that everyone has their stuff. Everyone is unique in the way they're constructed. And so I just want to be clear. I know that Dana, that was the sense in which he was saying that, but we don't want to back off of that either. So we don't want to co-opt disability, but at the same time, we don't want to back off of everyone's brokenness. We all enjoy the glories of life and the difficulties of life. And it would be good for us to give each other just a little bit of grace. As you were saying earlier, Dana, that love, to love somebody that's unlovable, love them in the unlovable part to demonstrate that.
And I think that's the conduit that God uses for us. As I experienced that from Bob Long, the guy that offered that unconditional love to me, that was the conduit that God was able to speak to my heart. And I think when we are willing to love those who even feel unlovable and continue to love them, even if they reject us or push us away, continue to reach out in that way, we become the people of God.
Yeah.
And the conduit of God's love.
Really good. Next question.
Okay.
All right. New big piece of paper. How long?
How did he get me into this?
I don't know, but we're really glad he did.
How long was Ruth an administrator at Simi Valley Unified School District?
Oh, that's too easy. Mine was hard. His is easy.
Got it.
I just want you to know, Ruth didn't even write her answer until she looked at Dana's. So we have no idea if that's legit or
we
not.
know, I trust.
It's legit. It's legit. I had to suffer. I mean, I went through that with her for a full year.
So
Ruth, get us
she's giving me this here, right?
Get us from where you were to Simi Valley.
Okay. Where was I?
And tell us about Simi Valley.
Let's see. Okay, so I graduated with my master's, finished Coalition, and graduated with my master's in special education, preschool through adult. And then I get out to California with Dana, and that's a long story, but we ended up going to California so he could pursue Fuller Seminary. And when we got out there, I was trying to get my credential good in California because it was good in Pennsylvania. And they said, which credential do you want? Do you want resource? Do you want, there were like 5 categories. And so preschool through adult was unheard of, and mild to severe was unheard of. And I had to pick. So I sort of picked one and started to work at it. But I had to jump through a lot of hoops and take a lot of classes. And I had 4 children then. We had left Pittsburgh with 4 children.
All under the age of 9.
Yes.
How many states have you lived in?
2.
Just 2.
2 measly states.
And they are
Pennsylvania and California. So when I got there, it took me longer to get my special ed master's degree, a credential I could use and get hired, than it did to get a marriage and family counseling license in California. And how I got that was Dana was taking classes at Fuller in the marriage and family department, but not until I did. He was really getting his MDiv, and I was allowed to sit in on classes for free to audit as a wife. And so I
did a 2-year program to finish my Master of Divinity. And that's why the reason we went to Fuller initially. And so we
went on a marriage retreat and talked about what our goals as a couple were, what our gifts were, what our passions were, what we were going to do. And Dana kind of felt like he would rather do the family life part of the church, not the preaching upfront part. And I had audited enough classes that I had fallen in love with the marriage and family therapy program, and I really wanted to do it. So we somehow got big enough loans to both do the marriage and family program together. We had lots of supportive people around us. We took classes opposite times, except for one class that we would take together. We would walk out of the class and say, "We are not a dysfunctional family. We are not because we learned all about dysfunctional families. And of course, we had to apply everything immediately and had to talk to each other. Now, I will say, Dana procrastinated on all his papers. And so we had one little tiny computer, one typewriter in the beginning. And I would have to write my papers early because we shared books. We didn't have a lot of money, but it was wonderful years. And then we left Fuller. So at that point, I had a marriage and family credential, but I didn't have the hours yet. And then the Lord kind of led us through another process. And I don't want to use language that people wouldn't understand. But anyway, we ended up at a church in Thousand Oaks, a Presbyterian church. And at that time, I was able to do my internship for California. And somewhere I was still trying to get my credential, my teaching credential, which I did get. And I eventually started doing the teaching, less counseling.
Part-time.
Part-time, because
the
I
kids
had
were young. We
the
did
children were little,
each.
so very part-time. And at one point, my daughter said to me, Mom, can you drive us somewhere? And I said, well, couldn't her mom do it? Her mom works. And I thought, wow, she doesn't know I go to school. She doesn't know I work. I'm a successful mom here. But anyway,
Nice.
we somehow got that all together. And then I got licensed by the state of California as a marriage and family therapist. Dana had the whole same program, but he never went through the licensing process because he was working as a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So then, basically, what happened got you to see me. So when the kids left, you went full time where?
I taught part time as a resource specialist. I taught part time as a preschool interventionist. I taught part time as a speech therapist. I kind of moved around a district. And I was at that district for about 13 years. And that, I worked in Conejo Valley Unified School District and then Las Virgenes, if anyone's from that area. And probably put in 8 years in Conejo as a special ed teacher, resource math, English, directed studies, and then moved to a preschool setting and was an administrator in that preschool setting for early intervention. Loved providing those services for those little kids.
11 years.
3 to 5. I did that for about 11 years. And then my very final year was in Simi Valley, and I was resource specialist administrator type for probably, I think it was 7 elementary schools and 1 middle school that had all kinds of programs for persons that were struggling with mental illnesses, for persons that were struggling with cognitive delays, for persons that had learning disabilities, for persons that had physical handicaps. So all of my experiences have given me, they gave me the preschool through adult. But yeah.
Now you, somewhere in your process, you were part of integrated classrooms.
Yes.
What was that, or how does that?
Well, probably everywhere along the way, I was part of that because a lot of times parents would come to IEPs with ideas for where their child would thrive and do best and be able to achieve success. And so.
But I felt like there was something innovative that you were doing.
Oh, our preschool. Yeah, our preschool was a model for the state. Now, most preschools that are giving services for persons that have special needs are also supposed to be integrated into classrooms where typical peers, is the phrase that's used, are also learning. So our preschool was one of the first to do that before it was kind of mandated. And I think a lot of that's kind of been pulled back since of COVID. There's some things that have happened, but
that became a thing in California where everybody was doing it.
No.
It's become a model.
It's become somewhat of a model, and it's become more widespread, certainly. And research, it's evidence-based that this benefits everyone. This benefits the children that are receiving services. This benefits the children that are coming that don't receive services, because everyone's learning together and everyone's seeing differences and seeing how to support one another in those weaker areas and celebrating the strengths. And so I would say that it was a beautiful model for everyone, and it didn't just benefit children that were receiving services and had special needs.
Let's come back to that one more time at the end of the show.
Okay.
I'd like to talk specifically about that issue that you're talking about there.
Okay.
Let's do one more question.
Uh-huh.
I don't. If you watch the show, you know I like to stump people at least once.
Good luck,
Okay?
guys.
So this is
I'm
the
rooting
stumper.
for you.
This is supposed to be the stumper question.
All right.
And so here's the question. It's
Kristen said.
what was Chris? What
She said the twins are in an integrated school district.
Oh, yes.
Her
The
twins.
twins are. Yeah. Our grandchildren,
Live in
we have a
Boston.
set of twins. Kristen, who's on this show often commenting, has 5-year-old twins, and they were born premature, and Emma had failure to thrive in utero. And she's doing...
What's failure to thrive?
She's not growing adequately.
Uh-huh.
And we knew that from the beginning. And so the twins were born a little bit early on purpose to save Emma. And RJ and Emma were both in the NICU, the neonatal unit, for a little longer than children. Most children are not in there at all. And then some are in for some time. Emma was in there longer than her brother, her twin brother. And Emma has had to have a feeding tube because we want that nutrition to get to her brain. And she goes to, they live in Boston, and so they go to Boston Children's Hospital, and have had a wonderful team of people helping Emma to get the nutrients that she needs. But she has a feeding tube, and she has some special needs, and she's a beautiful little girl, and she's thriving, and both RJ and Emma are growing. But they're in an integrated preschool, and they can learn from the role models and the kids that are there as role models are learning from them.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that. So so here's the 2-part question.
Okay.
It's a 2-part question. All right. So what I want you to write is I want you to write Dana at the top, and then I want you to write to the right of Dana. I want you to write Ruth. Dana, and then over on the other side, Ruth. It's a 2-part question. There's going to be an answer for each of you. Okay. So what color was Dana's favorite car? Put that under Dana. And what color was Ruth's favorite car?
Okay, I got it. I got it.
That's the.
I'm torn. Can I have 2 answers?
Nope, you can only have one answer. What color?
It depends on which one you're going to take.
I'm going.
Hey, there's none of this talking. We're going to have to put you in.
Okay, I might have to agree with you, Cal, on this one.
Yeah.
We
what we're learning is we're going to have to put people in isolated booths with the headphones on.
My favorite car. Oh, gee.
Favorite car through your life. I used to drive Ruth's car. Ruth had a stick shift when was that? College. And I learned to drive a stick shift.
Was that the Vega?
On your
was
car.
Was that the Vega? Oh, jeez.
Okay, so let's so Dana, say what was the color of your
I'm going to say she's going to say yellow, but my favorite car actually was green.
Okay.
All right.
So tell it. So she said yellow.
Yellow.
And what did you say, Ruth?
I also, my second one was blue because we had a Honda that Dana made money on. We got the car, drove the car, bought it new, and sold it for more than we.
And that's what made it your favorite car.
It made it his
for her.
favorite. Yes.
No, my favorite car. Actually, I built a car. I've shown it to. It's called a 1927 Bugatti Kid on a Volkswagen.
Yeah,
so that's
I remember that.
That's why the yellow one is the reason.
That's
the yellow one. But I had a 1969 Camaro 307 3-speed, and that was the bomb.
And I never saw it.
I love that car. I wish I yeah. And so
it was green.
It was a green car. It was a British racing green.
So Dana, what was the car that you drove right before we got married when we were dating? It was a great big clunker, and the doors would come open in the cold.
No.
It'd freeze open.
That was probably
that was what the car that I called the Roach.
He called it the Roach, and someone.
It was a Plymouth Valiant, the lowest possible model you could have, and it was we were poor, but we
shows
didn't know
how college works.
We just didn't know it.
We go from the Camaro to the Roach.
And I just need to tell you that the Roach was very dear to him, but someone slammed into it on a street in Oakland, and we just had to get rid of it because we couldn't use it anymore. And he sold it for $200, and the guy never paid us, took the car, and we never went after him.
We were happy. He might return the car. Okay, Ruth, what was your favorite car? You struggled with even knowing what your favorite car was.
I actually decided that it was the Vega because it's the only car I picked. Dana picks the cars in our family, and I'm fine with that. He always picks good ones. But I like the Vega, and when he was dating me, he made fun of my car. And I didn't like
for good reason.
So I'm sticking with that car.
It was a Vega,
So we're here with Ruth and Dana, family counselors from California. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. A lot of people will be watching this recorded, so they don't have the opportunity to ask questions. We've been trying to take the conversation a little bit in a direction and focus a lot on Dana and his perspectives, because we think this might be one of the rare opportunities we'll get him on the air. So this is where I want to end, and I want to set it up with a little bit of a story. Uniquely the Same has put in a proposal in the North Hills of Pittsburgh, in the North Hills area, Cranberry area.
Nice.
And we've put in a proposal to purchase a piece of property, which we don't know whether we'll get or not, but that's not really the issue. But when we put the proposal in, this property was actually sold to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the community hated the idea and rose up against it, and the sale fell through. So when we did our proposal, we have said we want to actually meet with the community. We want to do what we call a community conversation, where we bring the movers and shakers from the community, the council members, the mayors, the police, the firemen, but also common people from the community, and people that have no experience with disability whatsoever, but then also people who are disabled and people who are parents of people who are disabled. And we want to bring them into a room and have this conversation about what the property would be about. We're going to do housing and employment. That's basically where we would focus this particular. It's a 32-acre property. It has 10 houses on it. But basically, if that happens, in a way, we'll have to sell the idea to the community. They've already rejected one service thing, right? So I'm trying to hone my pitch a little bit. So this is my question. If you were me, how would you hone that pitch to what is the value? Not just you're welcome to speak about the value to people affected by disability, but that's almost clear cut, right? That you understand that. What's the value to the community or to the individual who doesn't have a disability, who maybe even has a fear, right, of disability, or is afraid of what it might, like afraid of the unknown? So the question is, what do we say? And let's draw on our experience at the at the school with the integrated classroom stuff, with the inner city ministry, and how it and how it's affected your life. And the reason why I think it's a good question for you two is because you've gone through a bunch of ministry, and you live in a pretty elite part of the country. You live in Thousand Oaks, and that's a really beautiful, lovely, high-end place in the country. And so how does the other ministry impact family counseling there? And how would you, just so that's a very broad question. You can go with it anywhere you'd like to go. But that's where I'd like to end the show, is just see, what are your thoughts? I don't want to put too much pressure on us all. We can just brainstorm together.
I think we are a community of people. We aren't a community of people with special needs and a community, we are a community of people. And I think if you think about any family, when I was in college and I took something called Counseling the Parents of a Handicapped Child.
Yeah.
And that was a class that I took. And, I am the parent of children, not a child. I had 4 children. I am a parent of children that have had special needs. I've had children, 2 of them anyway, with IEPs all the way through. And now I have grandchildren. I think we're talking about us. I think all of us have needs. And so to have a center that addresses the needs that are not being addressed is to help all of us. It's to support all of us. It's to provide for the families. So that's what I would say.
So I heard too, things in there. Let me just sort of bounce it off you. One is that disability. We use the term disability because it's a line of demarcation that helps us figure out who we give services to and who we don't.
Yes.
And so there's a line at which, when you cross that line, you're categorized disabled,
right.
and before that line, you're not categorized disabled.
Right.
I meet a lot of people who are almost categorized disabled, but they're really struggling in life, and they sort of wish they were a little bit more disabled.
Yeah, for sure.
But they because they can't get the extra supports. But that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier when I was talking about co-opting, is we all have our struggles. I forgot the word that you used, but our difficulties. And
but the way we learn from each other is so valuable and so important, and helps one person to grow. My strength can be your support. Your strength can be my support. And with all of us, and without sort of making those categorical things, but there are certain things in our community that are missing. And what you're proposing sounds like something that's very much missing.
Yeah.
And, okay, the kids are in school with IEPs. And if you work for a good district, and most of my life, I worked for wonderful districts where I was never asked to not give services that were needed because of money. A lot of times people feel like that'll happen. I personally, whenever I was in a situation like that, either tried to change it or got out, because I couldn't do that. But I think once you're done, you can be there for 21 until you're 21, right? The services expand for some kids beyond high school to 21. And yes, you've got goals for what you're going to do after, but having a couple of children of my own personally that had IEPs, none of them stayed till 21, but they had goals for transition. Those transitions didn't work very well. So then what happens to our family members? What happens to our community members that don't have opportunities beyond high school for career, for paths and plans? And then there's nobody. Well, sometimes the Department of Rehab jumps in and helps out. But we all know that the services are limited, and there aren't enough. And even as a marriage and family counselor, even counseling people towards career choices, it just kind of goes away. It disappears when those people become adults in a way that they're able to actually benefit a lot from it. And then it's over. That part's over, Absolutely. At least the very strategic special ed IEP process.
Yeah. I love the way you put it, that this isn't something unique. This is community. This is, I mean, you can't say community without including everybody in the community.
Absolutely.
you might try to do that, but this actually is our community. And even if we didn't want to deal with it, that's not an option.
It's not going to go away.
Yeah, it's still.
In fact, it becomes a huge problem in Los Angeles, because many of those people who have left the services are living on the streets and are homeless and are all of that kind of thing. Yeah. And so as a consequence, I think the model that Ruth talked about, there were clearly parents in the community who wanted their kids to be a part of this preschool because of what it offered to the typical
We had
kids.
A waiting list of how long. Yeah. We have. We still do.
The typical kids, quote unquote, those parents wanted their kids involved in that way so that they had an opportunity to see something different, to support those kids, to do all that kind of stuff. But they learned so much from them. I mean, much like my opportunity in Harlem, it was life-changing. And I think that you're going to find those people in communities where you go. But then on top of that, I think the other piece of it is, if we look at services that are available for them post-high school, that's something you're looking at and something you're offering. And I think a community would want to see something like that.
It makes me a little sad to hear that they didn't want the AA program, because that is also our community. That's our families. As a marriage and family therapist, that's our kids. And, we can put the walls up and push them away. I remember someone saying to Dana once, there's not much difference really between suburbia and the inner city. It's just sometimes suburbia has houses with walls that are a little bigger and a little fancier, but there's the same pain and hurt and addictions and dysfunction.
We can just we can cover those things with affluence.
We can hide it a little better.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That makes me sad about that, but I hope you get the building because I think your thing's going to be great.
Yeah, we're hopeful.
And I think it would be great. But you might want to,
but if not there, somewhere else.
You might want to rent a little room if you get it to AA.
There you go.
Well, it turns out people affected by disability, any of those categories, drug abuse, marriage, all those things. There's actually a higher percentage.
Always the intersection, right? Yeah. Always the intersection, and yes.
So, when we were thinking about doing outreach kinds of things in the presbytery that I was a part of, which is a grouping of a lot of Presbyterian churches, the way that it was framed, and I really like the way it was, that when we go in to serve others, there's three things. We are servants to them, and servants we're better than you are. It's how can we learn together? How can we offer what we have? How can you? The second one was learners. I can learn from you. I can learn from you in the struggle that you have. You can teach me a lot. And the third thing is storytellers. When we come and tell our own story of how God's been at work in our lives, we can offer that to you also. And I really love those three concepts and hear your story. And really that, the language Ruth was a listener. If we could ever learn to listen well to each other, when I'm listened to well, it frees me to tell my full story.
Is there a person in your life who would be considered disenfranchised, who had a big impact? Is there a story that you have?
Oh, there's so many.
Is there one that comes to mind, or I don't want to over push it.
Who did we just met with? Darlene?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking is that when you were in Oakland early in your marriage, you came into relationship, and I remember my relationships, Linda and my relationships, when we were first married, how they were rich, and you were living life, and you had young kids, and and you were experiencing some really cool parts of life together, and that built really deep community. So I'm just wondering if there's anyone anywhere. I'm not over pushing it.
No, we had, when we left the coalition, we went to this small church.
Actually, I want to clarify that. The coalition actually supported us in this process.
Yeah, that's true.
The coalition gave us opportunity to bring college students into where we were working in the Hill District, much like the experience I'd had in Harlem. And so we were able to develop that kind of a model. So coalition was actually a support of the urban ministry. What I was
going to say is that those college students from Pitt that I worked with, several of them got married to each other and moved into our neighborhood, right in between the housing project and the University of Pittsburgh and all the hospitals. And out of that, several couples came and started their families and bought houses and raised their children there. And we were together a very, very close community. And we, prayed together, played together, had vision for what the church could do together. There was a ministry for tutoring. There was a ministry for fixing houses. There was a ministry for selling houses. There was a ministry for career. And those all came out of the church. There was a food pantry. I started a daycare center because I saw some addicted adults taking care of children in the home while the parents were working, and uncles and aunts taking care of my neighbor's kids, and you'd never see the kids, and you'd wonder where they are, what's going on. So we started this child care center, and had a lot of the needs of the community were our needs because we lived in the community. So we, it was our neighborhood and it was our needs. Now I've lost my train of thought. Anyway,
disenfranchised person.
Yeah, out of those things, like there was one young man who had a heart of gold and a smile that could just so winsome, and he had very low cognition. So he would come to church week after week, and greet everybody. He was the greeter. And honestly, when he got sick and wasn't there, everybody was looking for that man.
Mm-hmm.
And just the most dear man in the world. And he continued to be there even after we left the church. There was a woman, I remember a woman named Nellie, who was very handicapped physically and cognitively.
Mm-hmm.
And we all brought Nellie into our homes and enjoyed her. And she was just, had stories and was a dear. It was hard to understand her language. You had to really work at it, but it was worth every listening ear to work at it. And Nellie died as part of the community there, and we sat with her. We got her bed. I don't remember the other things. And when I say we, I don't mean Dana and me. I mean the church community, those families that came, and then the new families, the black and white. We were a mix of black and white in that church community together. And, so the Nellies and the Richards, and, I could go on and on.
Yeah, that's great.
So we didn't have a disability ministry because we didn't need to reach out. We just took everybody that was there and just met the needs as they arose.
Thanks for that. The Eric Carter, who is probably the leading special education researcher in the world. Almost all the special education research that's Christian, that's Christian, has his name on it. Like he's at least a co-participant in it. It's amazing, like the phrases that you just tend to use or whatever, he invented them, right? The interesting thing about his story, and I don't want to tell his story for him, but the bottom line is he became a Christian because there was a person with an intellectual disability who led him to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so this guy, the greatest researcher in the field, right, came to the church because of this guy. And so it's sometimes we turn it around, and probably I think I remember in Eric's story, it started with Eric wanting to help this guy, but then this guy absolutely changed his life.
And totally agree.
So I just had lunch with a friend whose daughter has Williams syndrome. Daughter is an adult, in her 30s. And she goes to the University of Pittsburgh and goes to a particular class and does a lecture on what it's like from her perspective to see the world. And she loves God, and she shares it with everybody, including those people in that class. And she has been a role model for Dana and I have a niece whose daughter has a son who has Williams syndrome, and he is 13, 12. No, he's older than that, 14. And he's just decided and declared that he wants to be a minister. So that's going to be really interesting to see what God does with that young man. But anyway, I totally.
Cool. Ruth and Dana, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're going to stay with us, though. We're going to move on. We've got 2 segments that we always do toward the end of the show. So we're going to just move to those. And Ida has her saying of the week, which is one of the highlights that everyone waits for.
I do.
So Ida puts these sayings out at least once a week, and she's been doing it for 5+ years.
And I steal them and put them on Facebook.
Yeah. Glad you do.
So let's roll to Ida's saying of the week.
This is a saying that is from Anne Lamott, and I love it, and it applies to all of us. I do not understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are and does not leave us where it found us.
Well said.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Grace is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Let's move on to our joke of the week. Our jokester of the week is Victoria Matthews. If you were watching the show, a number of people got confused last night because we did this show on Wednesday, and a number of people said, "Oh, I didn't even know you were doing a show Thursday because I thought you did the show yesterday." So they didn't even schedule to be on with us tonight. So we got a number of notes like that. It was sort of a special event, but Victoria was in the audience. She was there with us, not on camera or anything, but she was there just watching and she's the librarian at the Pitcairn Library, and we were using the library.
So you're saying you're doing this behind her back tonight?
Well, we
which is usual.
We do not claim that we're doing it behind her back.
No.
She published the photos.
Okay.
And so they're public domain, so we have every right to these.
Sorry, Victoria.
Behind her back.
I hope it's a good one.
Every right.
So Victoria said my parents complained that I had no sense of direction.
They did?
They did. So I packed up my stuff and I write.
Oh no.
Wait a minute. I packed up my stuff and write.
No sense of direction.
Oh, right.
Not left,
and
right.
right. Oh,
Cal,
all right.
okay,
I get it.
Victoria.
I get it. Victoria, I apologize.
Some of us are slower than others, but it makes a lot of sense. That's great.
There's no apology. That's an amazing joke.
That's a great joke.
It plays on all sorts of levels.
Sorry, Calvin, but it's not a great joke.
Well done, Victoria.
There you go.
I like it.
Do we have any shout outs or anything else going on in the world?
We have a few birthdays.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, Penny Zeisloff's birthday is today. Sparkle Sparks, my dear friend Sparkle.
Sparkle Sparks. That's a name.
It's a name.
Is that really her name? There's not a
name.
nickname at all.
It's
Her
not
name
a
is
nickname.
Sparkle
Her name
Sparks.
is Sparkle Sparks.
That's
Sparkle
a great
Sparks.
name.
Here's
That's
to
a
you.
great name.
Tom Turner, birthday
Turner,
is today. Deb Close's birthday is on the 1st, and Elliot Partridge on the 3rd. So happy birthday, everybody. And
Thank you. If you have any shout outs, put them up right now before we get the show closed. And we'll put them up on the screen for you. But we're gonna bring the show to a close. We're at 9:11, so just a few minutes long. We wanted to go long because we had our special guests with us tonight. Ruth and Dana, thanks for being with us again.
thank you so much. It was
Fun.
wonderful.
Great to be here. Hi, Chris.
We loved it.
Hi, Kristen.
Yeah, we'll
We'll
Kristen.
see you tomorrow,
See
Chris.
Kristen soon. So we just want you all to know that I'm uniquely the same. You're uniquely the same. Together, we could change the world.